March 2184. The annual Academy Awards, or colloquially the Oscars, were undoubtedly the most important event in cinema, and not only terrestrial, but even pangalactic. The fact is that neither the Asari nor the Salars in general were bothered by such nonsense, but the sensitive hearts of the stars of 3 craved recognition. So the tradition of the Alliance spread very quickly throughout the Citadel, and these film awards were supposed to be a landmark event. Is this a joke? The first broadcast since humanity joined the Council? Now even the most severe Turian film critics will have to snap their mandibles and agree that the Oscar is not a fringe, but the most prestigious award in the galaxy. The extranet was buzzing. The live broadcast was conducted with minimal delay. The organizers paid the tariff with the maximum priority of hypercommunication, which was ahead of even non-urgent military and government dispatches. However, it should have been less expensive than nothing. Advertising fees covered the costs at times. A video about a wonderful omnivorous sunscreen has just ended, in which delicious Asari rolls were interspersed with Elcor and Canarian ones. The presenter, named Igonium, a well-deserved luminary of the Canar screen, handed over the microphone, another non-functional tradition of people, to Uwe Boll IX. The native German was the heir to a long pedigree of directors who had been firmly established in the global mainstream for 100 years. A plump, bald man with the appearance of a typical fascist smiled at all 32, greeted the audience and read out, "And the award for the best picture of the year is coming." January 2184. A year ago, a similar meeting would have taken place at the Citadel, in one of the rooms reserved for hundreds of thousands of employees of the Council administration. But after the military got their hands on the Prothean AI, everything changed dramatically. Now any serious work was carried out either in bunkers or, even better, on space stations and warships. This hall was located on board a hierarchy cruiser with the proud name Murgaravor, most likely in honor of one of the famous commanders of the pre-space era of Palavan. Otherwise, from one of the Turian languages, which is very common on the planet Degaris, it translates as fragrant hollow. Theoretically, it is also possible, since according to the tradition of their fleet, the first captain of the ship himself gives him a name, but in practice, such a humorist would rise to high ranks. The Admiralty may look through its claws at those who like to compare length with flexibility, but the honor and reputation of the hierarchy are sacredly respected. The contingent in the room was a motley mix, one galactic from each of the 8 council races, including even the Drell. It's a bit strange considering the small number of Hanar's clients, but in the cases that we're about to discuss, it's not the number that decides, but the skill. And the reptilians, after all, were noted for their skills in the field of cloak and dagger. More dagger, of course. The room itself wasn't too big, just 3 empty chairs, counting the 2 that Elcor had pushed aside. The hollow screen against the wall remained dark, and there were no drinks or snacks on the table, not even tablets. The representative of the Citadel's oldest race had just fallen silent after voicing her suggestion. "Are you serious about this now?" the Turian in civilian clothes asked with a frown. However, clothes could not hide either the bearing or other habits of a hereditary military man, but they would laugh at us in the same hegemony. And not only in hegemony, a heavy-set man with receding hairlines and a visor over his right eye replied in Asari. "Why the hell is our commission even doing this nonsense?" He spoke with an accent, but grammatically correct and clean enough. However, the next interviewee perfectly recognized in his reservations and accent a citizen of the Eurasian Union. "It's not about short-term reputation right now," the stunning matron scolded both of them. Unlike his colleagues, even the most ardent militarist would not have suspected her of being a military man. But in vain. Behind the neckline of the jumpsuit and the bust of the 5th size, the brave heart of the participant and organizer of hundreds of special operations was hidden. On her behalf alone, Gon operatives often had cloacal incontinence. "It's about the Reapers." "Milady, have you had too much red sand?" the Dagestani colonel asked skeptically. Do you think evil space robots are watching movies? He himself was an absolute rear guard, but he got his place not for his beautiful eyes and thick eyebrows, but for his inquisitive, sharp mind, which spoiled a lot of blood for both the Batars and the scouts of the current partners on the council. The Geth are definitely watching. Asari shot him an icy look. And the Reapers undoubtedly have active agents of surveillance and influence. To believe that the Sovereign was the only one would be the height of naivety. And if, for example, the Road of Valor wins, it will increase the chances that they will suspect us of preparing for war. Well, all right, the General of Hierarchy clicked with displeasure, to whom the dubbed film was very close to his heart. But why not something else? The Last Blasto, for example? Really, this one is wondering why not Blasto? A slightly lilac canar boomed. In terms of fees, he is in the top 3 last year. Too much aggression. Matrona shook her head. The chest swayed excitedly after them, attracting the eyes of the males, regardless of race, and although there is a noticeable element of satire, it is still missing. Some kind of art house, tweeted Zamal Iroka, a not-yet-old analyst at the Surkesh Information Service, a kind of analog of the National Security Agency that still existed in the United States. Works by Francis Kitt. They are not aggressive. They are difficult to understand. Well, you're overreacting about non-aggression, the blue-skinned woman disagreed. He has Macbeth with British actors in his plans. Although Hamlet would be suitable. Unfortunately, the film adaptation should be expected at best by the end of the year, but rather, in general, next year. What does Hamlet have to do with it? The man was surprised, peering at the lines visible only to him. Although, yes. Oh, Allah. Is it really so boring for Asari to live that you waste time on such a mess? You don't know anything about art, Shamil Andreevich. The Tessian woman frowned reproachfully. And for some reason in your traditions it is considered that it is permissible for the military. This is utter nonsense, because it is through learning about art that you can truly consider the deep motivations of the intelligent. It wasn't even a low blow. No, it was a well-deserved spit at the most intimate thing for Officer Aliens, his professionalism. Well, that doesn't apply to the Reapers, the soldier muttered in embarrassment. And why are you so sure of that? Galact smiled slightly. I agree, said Zamnovodny. Lack of data. The assumption is unfounded. We're getting distracted. The man hurried to change the uncomfortable topic. What about the 50 second trashy girls? There are also good fees. What an abomination. Titsov grimaced. Would you still suggest a new mouse heresy? What are they like? Puff, 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 puff wept, but ate puff cactus. The representative of the Volus slightly mocked the patron's cinematic preferences. An Earth movie shouldn't win 4 years in a row, Asari shrugged. Indeed, there was an unspoken tradition of not choosing too many winners from one political entity, and the Alliance received the last 3 awards. Last year, for the drama The Suffering of Baby Goats, which revealed the complex relationship between black immigrants from the Rings of Saturn and the Neo-Mennonite commune on Terra Nova against the background of the romantic development of a love non-binary pentagram. This one doesn't understand. Isn't your offer mundane? The Hentacle mini-monster was surprised. It's a Beckenstein production, the femme fatale explained. And there are a lot more Batars, Drells, and other galactics among the actors than there are people. There are even quads. Matrona smiled. To the others, they were muddy grunts in spacesuits. And she still remembered how their students lit them before the Geth staged the uprising of the machines. Why, being a snotty virgin, she somehow had an affair with one of them. Back then, she was still fascinated by how much the faces of these Xenos looked like the Asari themselves. Although, yes, humans are even closer. But at that time, Homo did not even invent steamships with a railway, let alone going into space. And if you think that during her childhood, Her fellow council members in many parts of their planet also indulged in cannibalism. It becomes quite sad. "I'm going to throw up," Mr. Magomedov muttered softly. "Let's at least have a Solarian storm in a water lily." "I support it," the analyst agreed with the nomination. "Good fees. A peaceful story. Vitally." Asari thought about it. On the one hand, the domestic drama was suitable in many ways, but on the other— "No, still not," she said. "You know, there is no necessary level of moral degradation in the picture," the matron spread her hands, "but we should show the reapers the weakness, decline, and decay of society, to make sure that there was an accident at the Citadel and the Council did not learn any lessons from it." The Turian frowned. It was difficult to argue with the Tessian, but there are limits beyond which a reasonable person should not go. We also need to think about the children. "Since we need degradation, why not promote the Chihora slave?" And in the face, Matrona, who had been unperturbed before, asked, "Chikhaura was a popular name in the republics about 200 years ago, so there were a lot of girls with him, and that was her own name. Well, the masterpiece of Batarian cinema combined a powerful propaganda motif that praised the culture of hegemony, a love line, as well as an abundance of not-too-soft eroticism performed by the main character and courageous four-eyed males." "Well, starting from about the 5th minute," Bird grunted vulgarly and clicked his mandibles. March, 2185. Boruk Bloom, a partner in the giant accounting firm on Earth, hated with all his soul the memes about cunning, greedy, and thieving Jews with rat faces that were circulating on the extranet. Firstly, because anti-Semitism is a shameful relic of the past that should have long since sunk into oblivion, along with racism. But it has not sunk. Secondly, because, thanks to the religious principles of the community, he inherited from his parents a long nose, a slightly deformed bite caused by a slightly depressed chin, and the bulging eyes of an Ashkenazi degenerate, which really gave him an undeniable resemblance to a rodent. And thirdly, because he was suddenly cunning, greedy, and thieving in his life. Because of the latter quality, the rising audit star had problems. But what to do? After all, a poor Jew also wants carnal love, and for free, with his physical and moral data, you can squeeze only 116 greasy kilograms of his wife Sorochka, who was Boruk's cousin at the same time. Prostitutes, on the other hand, were not initially a cheap pleasure, but when they saw the slobbery lips and sweaty paws of a concerned Jew, they generally raised the tariffs almost threefold. Of course, there were also Asari, who didn't care about appearance in principle, but the arms of eternity broke off for Mr. Bloom exactly once. The blue-skinned maiden stoically endured the session, earned the fee, escorted the completely satisfied man out the door, and ran into the shower, where she scrubbed herself with a washcloth for an hour and a half. Unfortunately, from the memories and impressions she received from mental contact with the sneaky, cowardly M. You can't get rid of a duck so easily, but that's not the point. But the fact that on the same day, the Teshin woman blacklisted Boruk as a particularly nasty client with whom it's better not to deal, except for a lot of money. As a rule, the problems were solved. For example, by framing a colleague, greasing his superiors, or complaining about anti-Semitism. Oddly enough, this worked in the 22nd century. But today, none of the proven methods could help. Two men in civilian clothes came to visit. One of them, mercilessly ignoring the common religion, said that she would not focus on the small sins of a successful accountant, so as not to waste time, of course. And she just read out a list of several dozen major sins, for each of which there was a dismissal with a wolf ticket, and for a total of 80 years in a general regime prison. She also philosophically remarked that at least there would be no need to fear harassment behind bars, because even a thief would not be aroused against the future defendant. After that, a not-too-young lady went out to get some air, and the remaining black lady in an immaculate black pantsuit directed the gaze of a mature wolfhound at the fraudster, under which he felt like excrement just before flushing into the toilet. The woman in black made Bloom an offer that cannot be refused. If he does not want to get to know the justice of the United States, then the Oscar should be won by the film, whose name appeared for a few seconds on the tablet in her hand. The company has consistently conducted an audit of the voting at the Film Awards since 1935, from the 7th ceremony, and it was Boruk who was the partner responsible for this project, among others, of course. There was a good chance that the Wright painting would receive an award without his intervention, but 2 days before the ceremonies, the thieving Jew was very uncomfortable. He didn't want to live at all, but that day he had to put a diaper under his pants because every now and then his loins uncontrollably ejected a few drops, then a trickle, unable to keep the liquid in his bladder. But no, it didn't. According to the votes, the first thing that came out was not what the feds demanded. On the other hand, the difference was not critical. The chance that the substitution would surface was minuscule. The boss waited until the office was empty, went to the toilet to drain the gravy and change the diapers, and returned to the table. He took one last look around, and the colonel was sitting at home, frowning at the Tri-V screen. The German on the screen, with an important face, read out the last, most important result. And the award for the best picture of the year goes to the movie Languid Party of Glamorous Boys. Ugh, this is disgusting, the man thought, and the clippings made him feel sick. It's a shame for the country, he muttered aloud, and added something else in his native Avar. After all, director Mammadov, who became a celebrity overnight, not only came from the same village, but was also Shamil's classmate. April, 2184. The huge relic hanging in the blackness of intergalactic space showed no signs of activity, but the impression was deceptive. Server farms with hundreds of thousands of processors were fully operational inside, actively analyzing unimaginable flows of information for organics. Fleet Element 01 assessed the state of the galaxy and planned the next steps. The vanguard might be on its way, but the strategy for the upcoming harvest still had to be decided. Him. The metal colossus was old. It's old even on the geological scale. Although not as ancient as his race sometimes lied to organics, he existed for so long that all the stars of the galaxy managed to make at least one complete revolution around its center during that time. And although he was awake for barely 100th of the lived eons, there was enough time to even drain the roof of the AI. Harbinger was bored. The last time he really had fun was when some of the fellow Reapers rebelled against the will of the creators and control element 0. As a result of the fighting, the fleet was reduced by as much as 16% of the current number, including losses and destroyed rebels. But since then, the design of heavy platforms has included control clusters that preclude disobedience and organics. What can you expect from ephemeral pieces of protoplasm? So the commander element of the fleet, cycle after cycle, dispersed melancholy as best he could, using as few resources as possible in the harvest and sometimes indulging in toys, as now the modified remnants of the dominant race of the last cycle. He easily fought off the blunt 0 for reasons of cost savings. The next batch of data has been processed by the analytical subprogram. If a synthetic could, he would have scowled with displeasure. Thousands of observations from the last cycle have shown that the popularity of same-sex mating in multigender biological species almost always correlates with scientific and military weakness. Although it would seem much weaker, this cycle was one of the most helpless, perhaps, in the archives of the Reapers. Only a heavy platform with a defective collection of processor clusters almost multiplied by a nilpotent matrix, the pitiful forces with which the organics defended the center of their travesty of civilization. Boredom, which is unlikely to be dispelled even by the race, which nevertheless managed to multiply by the nilpotent matrix of the loser Nazar. Although, maybe if we cut the mass of the second wave by 30%, the organics will flounder for a while, or is it better by 40%?